Your Eminence, Cardinal John Onaiyekan. Welcome to Norway.
Thank you.
In the last few years, a lot of reports from Nigeria have been filled with news about atrocities being committed against Christians by Muslim jihadists from the group Boko Haram, such as bombing of churches and other violent attacks and killings. However, you have been clear in emphasizing that on the ground, Christians and Muslims mostly live peacefully together. What are some of the main challenges in your work with interreligious dialogue in the light of Boko Haram and the climate of fear that they try to impose on the society?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for welcoming me to Norway. And I think the weather has also been very welcoming. I was expecting to meet a lot of snow and cold and rain, but it has been bright, for which we thank God. Now, to come to your question, it is true that we have had a lot of challenges from this group of terrorists who call themselves Islamic, even though the mainstream of Islam in Nigeria rejects them. They not only call themselves Islamic, which means they also claim to be doing whatever they are doing in the name of Islam, but apart from that, they are also particularly violent, and they attack in a very serious way, killing people, big numbers of people, and because of that, sowing terror in the land. But like you already rightly mentioned, this is not something that we are going through every day, or that the whole of Nigeria is littered with bombs and dead bodies. This is something that happens in a particular part of the country, in the northeast end. And secondly, it is the acts of terrorism takes place only once in a while, but very unpredictable, which is why the government has considered it necessary to put in place security measures that at the end of the day makes life very difficult for all of us. Checkpoints, long queues, and even for our churches too. We've had to design ways to make sure that people can't just drive into the compound, because they used to drive in with bombs. All that has stopped now. More importantly is that out here in Europe, these clamorous, violent activities of these terrorists take the front page very quickly. Breaking news in television, especially the international news media. Just as I believe there are people in Nigeria who quickly send to the international news agencies news of these attacks. The impression then gets created that our country is a place where it is not safe. And above all, the impression is given that it's a country where Muslims are killing Christians every day. I'm glad to say that that is not true. I'm glad to say that the vast majority of our Nigerian Muslims are men and women of peace, and who have been living in peace with us. It is not as if Islam arrived in Nigeria only last year.
No.
We have been living together,
for many years.
And you have not been hearing this kind of news for so long. So something has just happened with this group, and because of that, precisely because they are a new group, it is taking the government quite some time to devise an effective way of dealing with them.
Is the government strong enough to actually protect the Christians from these attacks? Is it a weak state?
Well, first of all, we should also realize that the Boko Haram are not simply singling out and attacking only Christians. They attack everybody. They target government institutions, whether they are schools, barracks, offices. One of their most well-known attacks was against the United Nations building, in which a good number of people died. They drove they drove a car loaded with bomb into the headquarters of the Nigeria police and destroyed many vehicles and killing themselves and some other people. So it is not as if this is a war of Christians against Muslims. However, the fact that people shouting Allah Akbar shoots at Christians who are worshipping is very terrible, and it makes a very strong impact. It also hits at the goodwill that we have been enjoying between Christians and Muslims in Nigeria. So much so that there are Christians who really do feel that they are targeted. And some of them also report it outside that we are under persecution. But personally, I don't believe it. As for you rightly raised the issue of government. We are not living in a failed state. We still have the armed forces. We have the police. They have not been particularly successful, but they are moving. The example I've always given is Iraq, where the Americans were there in big numbers. Or even today, or even in Afghanistan, the whole United States Army with all their sophisticated equipment, and yet terrorists strike.
Yeah, still there.
The only way you can stop them striking is to close down the whole country. Let nobody come out. But you can't do that in a nation. And so even though I would say that our security agencies have not succeeded much, or did not succeed much, I cannot blame them too much. They are learning now a little bit more how to deal with them. They have improved their methods. I think they have also made a lot of progress in regard to intelligence gathering, so as to know where they are and eliminate and scatter them before they strike. My reading of the situation is that the situation is getting under control, because we know, for example, that just even last week, a group which is supposed to be a splinter group among them is asking for dialogue. In other words, on what we want to lay down our arms, but under what conditions? This is what we are still discussing.
In the Catholic Church today, we are now in a so-called Year of Faith, which focuses on the new evangelization and the rediscovery of the joy found in belonging to the Church and Jesus Christ. How is this being lived out in an interreligious context in Nigeria?
Like every Catholic community, we are also celebrating the Year of Faith. In Nigeria, we have a full pastoral plan for the celebration of the Year of Faith. This focuses therefore on the now specific is on the Catholic and his Catholic faith.
Yes.
How much of our Catholic faith have we properly understood, and what is the level of our commitment to that faith? So we are talking not only of the knowledge of the faith, but also the zeal and the enthusiasm to live this faith, and not just proclaim it in words, but live it in our daily lives. Along with it, and especially as a result of the synod on the new evangelization, there is also the plans and pastoral programs about what more can we do to spread the Christian faith. You would think that this means then this might have a negative impact on our interfaith activities. But indeed it is on the contrary, because I believe family and experience has shown that only those who are deeply committed to their own faith can fruitfully reach out to others in serious and constructive dialogue. And one of the items of our program for deepening the faith is precisely how do we relate to other people in ecumenism, How do we relate with other other believers? In the case of Nigeria, mainly with Muslims and Islam. But we also talk about how do we dialogue with the society in which we live out there. It's all part and parcel of the program.
Yeah. Speaking about the church in Africa here in the West, there's always one topic which time and time again makes the headlines. The question of use of condoms in the fight against AIDS. The Norwegian Minister of International Development, Heikki Holmås, he was recently quoted saying that, and I quote, "The Pope has made an alliance with Iran and the US far right on a policy that limits women's access to contraceptives, a policy which has created, and I quote again, a lot of suffering and death." On the other side, the Church will be quick to emphasize the work it is doing to fight the epidemic. Within some areas of Africa, over 40% of palliative care being run by Catholic hospitals and clinics. And also, in an interview in 2010, Benedict XVI emphasized that, quote, "some situations when using a condom could be morally justified in the fight against AIDS." In the current climate, how is the Church in Africa thinking about this question?
First of all, let me appreciate the efforts and the generosity of the Norwegian government and people in helping poverty and whatever in many parts of Africa. Although I have not seen much of it in Nigeria. Having admitted that, I would of course say the gentleman you quoted, who has made such strong statements, may have his own reasons for making those statements, but I do not think that really goes to the root of the matter. And whom we ally with is not really the issue, but what do we ally with people on? And that is what people should ask. What are the issues on which the Catholic Church, at least on the official level, what are those issues on which the Catholic Church has taken a strong stand? And we believe that the least that anybody should do is to at least give the Catholic Church the right to express its own views and to promote its own doctrines and values. My problem with many of these people here in Europe is that you talk a lot about liberalism and freedom of speech and freedom of belief, provided we agree with you.
Yes.
Now, there's something wrong with that. Having said that, I think we need to distinguish between condoms as contraceptives and condoms as prevention
means to protect
of HIV and AIDS. And make that distinction between contraceptives is meant to prevent the life-giving force of sexual activity. So it is more or less like practically killing life. Whereas condoms, for the purposes of reducing the negative impact of HIV and AIDS, is to protect life. This distinction has not often been made, and maybe we, church too, have tended to look on condom simply in one univocal way. I have always made that distinction. Having made that distinction, we need to say that the problem of HIV and AIDS is much, much bigger than distributing rubber. Indeed, the distribution of condom is by far the easiest thing to do. And you rightly mentioned that among the most important issues with regard to pandemic is precisely how to take care of those who are already infected and whom the condom is not going to help.
Yes.
And if you spend your whole time distributing condom and you neglect those who are dying, who is going to look after them? Similarly, of course, when you come to protection against the spread of HIV and AIDS, everybody admitted that there are three main components: famous A, B, and C. And it's amazing that people simply focus on C. And they believe that abstinence is not possible. That's the dogma of these people. they all have their own dogmas too, like we have our own.
Mm-hmm.
They have the dogma that every human being must be having sex at least once a week, otherwise you will die. I don't know whether that is what they believe. Abstinence is neglected. Fidelity in marriage is considered as passé. And so we are left with condoms, which is being distributed around. And I say there's something wrong with that.
Is there a cultural conflict here between the liberal Europe, if you can say that, and sort of these African?
Well, you will notice. Well, you've noticed that when you come to Africa and you talk to people directly, you will notice that the majority of our people don't agree with this way of looking at things. And when people challenge me abroad, but why is it that you Catholics are not allowing your young people to use condoms so that's to protect them from dying? My first answer to them is, listen, none of you has any reason whatsoever to think that you are more concerned about my nephews and my nieces than I am. I'm certainly more concerned about them than you are. And it is precisely because I'm concerned about my young people and about their future that I give them the best advice as regards how not to catch HIV and AIDS. And the whole package of working against HIV and AIDS, in which the church has been very much involved and which our governments have recognized, is the amount of work we do about education, letting people know from the pulpits, from the villages, where we are all over the place, what are those things that cause HIV and AIDS? What are those things that do not cause HIV and AIDS? The whole area of removing or banishing discrimination and stigmatization. And as we know, it is stigmatization and discrimination that kills many victims of HIV and AIDS. Because in Africa, once you are ostracized from the community, you are dead.
Yeah.
You can't live alone. And so, earlier on in the AIDS, many of our people died simply because they are ostracized. Now, ostracized in a lot of simple ways. If you sit along some people and suddenly you see everybody getting up and going away and leaving you alone, or news is going around, that man is HIV.
He's sick. Yeah.
That was what killed them. And since we have been able to vigorously campaign for a proper understanding of what is HIV and AIDS, and the fact that it is a disease like any other one, and that those who have got HIV and AIDS deserve to be looked after. Since then, a lot has happened. And you only need to talk to those with whom we have been working, HIV and AIDS people, many of whom are also working within this system. And they said, before it was a death sentence, now we know that we can live.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, those who are bent on condoms for other reasons don't even see the amount of work that we have done in this regard. And sometimes we realize that there's really no need to argue too much. Let me make 2 points. The first point is this dogma that young people cannot be expected not to have sex. Well, those who say so should simply speak for themselves and not pretend that they know everything or that they understand our young people better than ourselves. With all sense of responsibility, we have been able to remind our young people, listen, don't live in a risky way. Don't, because of a few moments of enjoyment, lay yourself to the danger of catching a disease which at that time really had no cure. And they listened. They listened. And we also know that, really strictly speaking, when you have the right environment and the peer group pressure is in the proper direction, young people can live their lives. They go to their disco, dance and sing and go to football and whatever.
Yeah.
They don't have to be sleeping around like dogs. So that's the first point. The second point I want to make is They look on condom and HIV and AIDS in a purely mechanistic way. But in real life, it doesn't work like that way. Apart from the fact that many young people may carry around condoms and not use it.
Yes.
Or they may carry it around, use it badly. And if you are looking in the context of the poverty of the land, do they know the quality of condoms that is flying around?
But it's not that it's not hard to find condoms in Africa. There's a lot of condoms.
Pardon?
It's not hard to find condoms in Africa.
Of course, it's all over.
Yes.
It's all over. But the fact is that a scientific research was done in Nairobi. I mean scientific, not by the church, but by... And they discovered that 80% of the condoms that are sold in the villages and so on would not be allowed to be sold here in Norway because they are faulty. Now, add on to that, finally, the position of the church, especially with regard to young people, is not basically on condoms, but rather on behavior.
Yes.
We are not particularly hung on this rubber, but what we are saying is our moral directives is that if you are not married, you have no business having sex. Once you admit that, then what do you expect the Catholic Church to do? To start distributing condoms to young people and tell them, go ahead and enjoy yourself? We cannot. We are aware that there were those who will not follow our directives, but that should not stop us from preaching the ideal of the Christian life.
Just a short question to close this session about the condoms. In a Catholic marriage, where one of the people
that is the second point I was about to say.
Yes,
that we must not put on the same level the use of condom in what we call the discordant couples and the use of condom to boys in secondary school.
Yes.
In the case of a young couple, that is discordant couple, who have a right to sexual activity. Not only do they have a right, sometimes they even have a duty.
Yeah.
To their partner to have sexual activity. Then the discussion of the use or not use of condom must be put on a different plane. There, the plane, in my own position, there will be on how effective is this condom. Does it really protect your spouse? Yeah. That is easier to handle.
Thank you. Moving on. Benedict XVI more or less shocked everyone when he announced his resignation on the 11th of February. Having now had some time to reflect on his decision, what do you think his legacy will be?
Well, first of all, Benedict XVI already has a legacy of his 8 years of pontificate and the great work he has done, the wonderful encyclicals that he has brought out, and the serious work he has done in the mighty distraction that were put in front of him through a lot of the stories in the mass media about how well the child abuse cases have been handled. If you by the end of the day, when we shall tell the story, I think this history will recognize him as one of the great popes. For the moment, it's still too soon. And the fact that he resigned is use the word shocking. Well, for me, it was not shocking. No. I was a bit surprised, but it was not unexpected as such. Actually, before he made his resignation, during our investiture as cardinals in November, I was watching him. And I said, this man is very weak. And I said to myself, he is not the kind who will lie down in bed in the Vatican and allow other things to run shoes. Now, he will resign if it reaches that stage. If he found that his continued stay in the papacy would not be in the best interest of the church. And that's the decision he took. What we could say is that having been used to have a pope stay there until he dies, there are many people who will still feel a little bit disappointed. Why did he not just sit there? After all, another 3 or 4 years he would be dead. Yeah. But in the life of the church, 3 or 4 years, a lot of water can pass under the bridge. Yeah. And as a pope gets more and more physically and mentally debilitated, tendencies are that all kinds of funny things will begin to happen within the corridors of the papal palace. And if anybody knows about how things run in the Vatican, certainly Ratzinger did. He was there with them for 25 years. He knows exactly what was likely to happen. And I think from that point of view, he took not only a courageous decision, he took a wise decision. And I don't think there's any reason at all why we should be looking for any reasons beyond the reason that he himself has put down to us. Talking of legacy, one legacy certainly is it will be much easier for another pope in the future. Not every pope. It will be much easier for another pope who may reach the same kind of circumstances. It will be much easier for them to take the step of resignation. Because, let's say, Benedict has broken the jinx. Finally, people forget that the Code of Canon Law, as revised by John Paul II, precisely made provisions for the resignation of the Pope. Which means it is not as if something has happened which should not have happened.
Your Eminence, you were created a cardinal in November 2012 along with 5 others.
With 5 other friends,
yes. All from non-European countries, which was a consistory really emphasizing and showing the universality
of the church. The Pope said it very clearly.
Yes. Now, with 2/3 of the world's Catholic population now coming from the south, the inevitable question comes to mind. Is the church now ready for a pope from Africa, Asia, or Latin America?
My own response, this is not the first time I have heard that kind of story, that kind of question. And my answer has always been that the church is ready for a pope from Africa, Asia, Latin America from the days of St. Peter.
Yeah.
And but even today, the pope is not an African, German, or Polish. The pope is pope, full stop. And I think by the time, at least, you know the church very well and you read the level of a cardinal, and you know very well when you are going in to elect the pope, you are not going to elect your countryman. It's not as if you're a member of your political party. You go in there for a very serious work to pray and discern the voice of the Holy Spirit, so that somebody will emerge that will actually take charge of the church as a successor of St. Peter. At that point, the matter becomes extremely serious. And if you are talking of a sense of responsibility, I don't see any heavier than this.
You are one of the 115 cardinals which will soon elect the new pope. Of course, both Catholic and secular media are thriving with speculation on who will be elected and what his main qualities should be. Some are emphasizing the need for a broad pastoral experience. Some talk about the need of having good communication skills in the media world, but also being able to reform a part of the Roman Curia. In broad terms, what are some of the qualities you will be looking for going into the process of selecting a new pope?
First of all, the speculations of the press is understandable. And I think it's even a good thing that the world press is interested in who the pope is and who will be pope. So which means then that religion, and especially the Catholic religion, is not as irrelevant as they claim it is. And for me, who is a cardinal, it's a good news. It means out there is a genuine interest in what we stand for. how we manage that interest is the other matter. My own understanding is, if we go beyond the spiritual, pneumatological, that is Holy Spirit action, and we come down to the level of how we see things as human beings, one could say that every era has its own needs, its own challenges. And rather than look on it as you look for a pope who will meet these challenges, I rather look at the Holy Spirit will help us to have somebody who will come out and then see the challenges and address them with the help of the grace of office. There are two different ways of looking at it. So that it is not as if you now have somebody whom you think have all the qualities, and then when he comes, he's an expert on the matter. Mm. There's no such thing as an expert in the papacy. One has to believe that the kind of role that the Pope has is such that no human being can actually claim to be suitable for it.
Learning by doing.
Well, learning by being.
Yeah.
Once you are made a pope, you suddenly realize. So, God has chosen me as successor of St. Peter. He must give, and you can see the whole way of life of the Pope is all around that. His words are no longer his own. I always remember Pope John Paul II. He was very good at inviting us to lunch and supper with him. He will be speaking normally with you, and suddenly he will go into the third person. Yeah. He will say, the Pope will do this, meaning himself. Yeah. In other words, he's giving a distance between Carolus Votiva and Pope John Paul II. Mm. Generally, it is when he is thinking of the Pope as somebody bigger than himself. Mm. And obviously, the secular press cannot grasp that kind of scenario. Mm. They are used to seeing the Pope as a world leader, and world leaders are those who have climbed their way up and who have a manifesto, an agenda that they are going to push through. If you are looking for that from a Pope, sorry, you may not get it. If you ask me who am I going to vote for, I don't know.
No.
Honestly, I don't know till I get there.
What can we lay Catholics do during this conclave?
Pray and pray.
Pray and pray, yes. Good.
Yes.
And lastly, is there something you want to say to Norwegian Catholics listening to this?
Yeah, first, I've learned since I came here, first, that Catholics in Norway are a very small minority. And secondly, this small minority of Catholics also belong to many, many nationalities. And a good number of them are recent immigrants into Norway.
Yes.
In a way, therefore, the Catholic Church in Norway is very Catholic in the sense of universal. Yeah. And I want to congratulate the Norwegian Church for being able to accommodate that kind of church. And I'm sure, and I'm told too, that the practice of the faith is pretty high among the Norwegian Catholics. That must be also because the atmosphere has been created for them to feel at home, whatever their background. And this is what I want to stress and commend. I will be saying Mass very soon, 6 o'clock Mass for a group, English-speaking group, and maybe tomorrow also. So it will be my first opportunity of actually meeting the Catholic community in Norway. I wish them God's blessing, and I hope and I pray that God will continue to guide the leaders of that church.
Your Eminence, Cardinal John Onaiyekan, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for taking the time to give me opportunity to sing my own song here in Oslo.
Thanks.
Ciao.